and welcome to this morning's Education, Children and Young People's Executive. There may well still be a couple of folks to join us, but we will make a start to this morning. We have a number of apologies. We have a number of apologies this morning. If people can mute and use the hand icon if they can, or to indicate they want to speak, or just wave at me and I'll do my best. It's just sometimes there can be a feedback if people are unmuted. A number of apologies this morning. Apologies from Councillor Bissett and from Maureen Harkins. We also have a number of new folks that are joining us this morning. And I would just take the opportunity to welcome our new member from the Church of Scotland, and we have Agnes who's joining us today. Welcome, Agnes. I'll say a wee bit more about that when we get to the item. And also welcome to Councillor Russell. This is her first meeting and she's joined the Education, Children and Young People's Committee, so I hope that she's able to enjoy, and I'm sure we'll welcome her contributions. There are no other apologies, so do we have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Move on to item 3, which is the minute of the meeting of the Education, Children and Young People's Executive held on 14th of September. Are we happy to agree that minute?
Agreed.
Thank you, folks. Is there anything that's not contained elsewhere that MD would wish any feedback on in relation to the minute? No, thank you. We move to the rolling action log, and I think everything's pretty much up to date. But if there's any question, oh, sorry, Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. I just have the one question. It's in relation to ID number 575. That relates to the CLD action plan for 2018-21. We're due a report back in March next year, and I'm just wondering, with everything that's going on with the trust, with all their functions coming back into the council, and also the possibility that CLD is going to be split in the near future, with part of it possibly moving to housing, I'm just wondering if this report in March is going to detail all that.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you. Gary?
Thanks very much, Convener. Just to respond to Councillor Nimmo's question, Councillor Nimmo, the report is really a strategic report that looks at CLD across the whole council area. So really, at this point in time, it doesn't matter where CLD will be. It's a strategic report that looks at the whole action plans that were put in place and how the council are responding to that. So at this moment in time, there's no decision being made as to how CLD will be split up yet. Officers are still working on that. So just to rest assured and to be aware that the report that's coming next year will still give an overview of CLD across the whole council area, no matter what parts of CLD are sitting where. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions in relation to the rolling action log? No. Okay, thank you. Move on to item 5, which is the membership of the committee, and I'll turn to Mr. Moody for the report.
Thank you, Convener. And this is a very brief report which formalises the appointment of Agnes Mullen to this committee as the representative nominated by the Church of Scotland. It notes that Evelyn Crosby has stood down and asks you to appoint Agnes Mullen in their place. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. I would just like to take a minute or two to thank Evelyn Crosby for all the work that she's done since she joined the committee in 2019. Her contributions have been very valued, and I wish her well as she steps down into her retirement. I would also like to take the opportunity to welcome Agnes more formally. Just for those members of the committee, a little bit of background. Agnes worked at the National Office for the Church of Scotland for more than 2 decades prior to retirement in 2020. Her work involved around supporting the Church's engagement with education, including advice for church ministers, youth workers who acted as the school and further education college chaplains, organising competitions to develop best practice for delivery of religious observance, time for reflection, and in religious and moral education in non-denominational schools. And as a staff coordinator for the Church of Scotland's representatives of each of the Scotland's 32 local authorities education committees. Agnes is a member of Grangemouth, at Grangemouth in the Abbots Grange Church in Scotland. She has lived in the community for many years and is very much involved, including a spell as the chair of Falkirk District Arts and Civic Council. She's a real passion for young people and the work of the church in education, and her experience and extensive contacts and knowledge of the church and education matters will be an absolute asset in Falkirk. And through her sharing of her wisdom and support and work with local reps across Scotland. So we very much welcome you, Agnes. I hope you enjoy the committee today, and welcome to your contributions going forward. Reverend Rollo.
Is that me unmuted now? Yeah.
You're unmuted, yeah.
Formally welcome Agnes. I've worked with the things that Agnes has organised in the past that have been really helpful, and just like her bio said there, I'm sure she'll bring a wealth of experience. So just to say welcome, and to you, Agnes, I'm sure you'll be a great asset to this committee. Thank you.
Can I just ask members to endorse Agnes's thank you very much.
Agreed.
Oh,
Would you like to say a few words, Agnes?
no, just I will listen to this meeting, although I've had experience of all the reps around the country sending me reports of their meetings. I'm kind of excited but nervous about doing this, so I'll just listen on this occasion. But thank you for inviting me.
Don't be nervous, Agnes. If you feel that you want to contribute something, then feel free, and we will be very gentle with you.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. We move now to this morning's agenda item 6, which is a presentation on the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child. It's going to be by Julie Williams. Julie is there. Welcome, Julie, and thank you for coming along to the committee to speak to us today. After the presentation, I will give a short time for any questions that anybody may have, but I will now just hand over to Julie and welcome hearing our presentation today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for inviting me. Just before I start, just to make you aware, I've been ill with a cold, so if my voice goes, I do apologise, but I will try my best. But yeah, thank you very much for inviting me along to your meeting today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julie Williams. I am the Children's Rights Officer here in Falkirk. I am employed by Quarriers, and we deliver the Children's Rights Service here in Falkirk. I think somebody is putting my slide up. I'm not sure if somebody's putting the presentation up. I think they were. Thank you. Excellent, brilliant. So we can just move on to the next slide, if that's okay. So I'm going to just speak a wee bit about the Children's Rights Service, just to give you a wee insight as to what my role is here. So the service has been in Falkirk for over 14 years, and we support children and young people up to the age of 18 who are care experienced and those with additional support needs. However, we will not turn any child or young person away. Our focus is to empower children and young people, and we support to participate in the decisions that affect their life. We want their voices to be heard at the heart of these decisions that are made and that impact them. So this could be by supporting them to attend children's hearings. We support a child protection case conference. We have supported young people with their education, court proceedings, and many more issues that may come up for them. We also carry out a number of drop-in sessions to all the residential houses in the area, and we currently have around 6 of them. We also travel out with the authority and support children who are looked after elsewhere, so whether they're in foster care elsewhere or whether in another residential home, out with authority. We're a small service, there is only 2 of us, so we are limited in relation to our capacity. However, when I started with the service over 4 years ago, I was quite amazed at the amount of young people who didn't know that they had rights. And I thought it was really important for me to raise awareness of children's rights, so every child and young person in Falkirk is aware of their rights and what that means to them. I believed that as a children's rights service, we had a responsibility not only to provide independent advocacy support to children and young people, but to raise awareness of children's rights at a strategic level, and to embed children's rights throughout the local authority. So the first step for me in achieving that, I believed, was to encourage the local authority to sign up to the Rights, Respect and School Award. Now, this would raise awareness of children's rights right across the whole of the authority in relation to young people who were attending school. So at the end of 2019, the council signed up to a service level agreement with Unicef. What this does is this reduces the cost dramatically for all schools. So obviously, being part of this award, there is a cost behind that. By the council signing up, that removes a lot of that cost, which allows the schools to progress through the award without any extra added cost, which is a real benefit. So we currently have over half our schools signed up, so including our primary schools, and currently all our secondary schools have signed up. So my role within that is that I am the strategic lead within Falkirk. So I support our schools throughout that, offering advice and guidance, and I carry out ongoing assessments for them and work closely with Unicef to give the recognitions for our schools in relation to that. I've also been currently working really closely with our education department, and just the other week there we managed to hold a Microsoft Teams meeting for over 300 young people around COP26 and children's rights, and to gather their views. So it's been really quite successful, which is brilliant. I've also been working closely with our children's residential houses, and we're looking at how can we adapt this award to bring recognition to our residential houses within the local authority. How do they become rights respecting, and what does that look like for the children who live there? And then how do we adapt that award to bring it into the local authority and look at how does Falkirk become a rights respecting local authority, and what does that mean for the children and young people that live here? So a big piece of ongoing work that we're working on it currently to look at. I also currently chair the Children's Rights Engagement Group, which forms part of the Children's Commission Leadership Group. And we are tasked in co-producing our Children's Rights Plan with the children and young people of Falkirk, which will form part of the Integrated Children's Service Plan, as well as creating an ongoing engagement approach with children and young people. Another role that I carry out is supporting the Falkirk members of the Scottish Youth Parliament. We currently have 4 seats, and an election is taking place now where we have 14 young people who are fighting for those seats. So it's quite exciting. And we have 2 seats in the west and 2 seats in the east. Last night we held our first live streaming of a hustings, which went really well. And on the 22nd of November, we will be holding a results night celebration. And some of the young people have asked if any of you would be interested in joining us. And if so, I can speak to you a wee bit about that later on. Just finishing up in relation to my role in the Children's Rights Service, we are part of the Scottish Children's Rights Officers Network, and we work closely with our colleagues across Scotland, talking about different issues that are coming up, and we meet quarterly in relation to that. And currently I participate in the Scottish Government Steering Group in relation to the UNCRC Incorporation Bill. And that's why I'm here today, is to speak to you today and hopefully provide you with some information on this. So that's just a wee kind of brief summary of our role in relation to their children's rights service here in Falkirk. So the next slide, please. Brilliant. So the Scottish Government has a vision and a commitment to fully realising the human rights of all people in Scotland. They want to build a Scotland where respect for human rights forms the bedrock of society, a future based on tolerance, equality, shared values and respect, and also for it to be the best place in the world to grow up. So the Scottish Government therefore believes that the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child Incorporation Scotland Bill represents a significant step on the road to fully realising that future for Scotland. Next slide, please. So the UNCRC is the gold standard of children's rights across the world. It covers all aspects of a child's life and sets out the civil, political, economic, social and cultural rights that all children everywhere are entitled to. The bill was introduced to the Scottish Parliament on the 1st of September 2020 and was passed unanimously on the 16th of March 2021. The main purpose of the bill is to bring the UNCRC into Scots law, and the First Minister said the bill would incorporate the UNCRC into Scots law fully and directly. Next slide, please. So what does that mean, fully and directly? Well, what it means is that children's rights will be legally protected by law. We will be legally required to respect and protect their rights in every aspect of our work. The children and young people can use the courts to enforce their rights if they believe that they are being breached. The Children's Commissioner will have great responsibility in relation to that as well. They're still looking at where his role fits in around the whole bill moving forward. The bill also sets out additional duties on Scottish ministers, and an example of which is the completion of a children's rights wellbeing impact assessment. So this is a tool which predicts the impact of any proposed law, policy or budgetary allocation on children's enjoyment of their rights. A tool which can and should be used by all public bodies when introducing new policies, and I'll speak a wee bit about this later on in the presentation. But the main aim of the UNCRC bill is that children's rights are part of everyday life in Scotland. Next slide, please. Brilliant. So the UK government referred the bill to the Supreme Court on the 12th of April. As you will be aware, you'll have heard of this. They believed that the parts of the bill exceeded the powers of the Scottish Government. Now, they are not saying that they disagree with the bill. There's only sections within that bill that they believe go beyond the powers that the Scottish Government have. Next slide, please. So the Supreme Court took place on the 28th and 29th of June this year. The judges unanimously decided that 4 sections of the bill go beyond the powers of the Scottish Parliament. So those 4 sections include Section 6, which is a definition of public authorities. So this section looks at who needs to follow the new law. The Supreme Court said it was drafted very broadly and that it went beyond the powers of the Scottish Parliament. They then looked at Section 19, and this section looks at how laws should be interpreted to make sure they respect children's human rights. The judges said this section would give Scottish courts the power to interpret UK laws in ways that the UK Parliament didn't originally intend. So again, goes beyond the powers of the Scottish Parliament. Section 20 of the bill. So this section gives Scottish courts the powers to strike down certain laws that don't comply with children's rights. The Supreme Court said these powers could be used on laws passed by the UK Parliament, which would clearly affect the powers the UK Parliament has to make the laws for Scotland. So again, goes beyond their powers. In Section 21, Incompatibility Declarators. This section allows Scottish courts to make a declaration if a certain law doesn't comply with children's rights. And again, they said this would affect the powers of the UK Parliament to make laws for Scotland. So again, goes beyond the powers of the Scottish Parliament. So next slide, please. So now what? So what does that mean for the UNCRC incorporation bill now? Well, the Scottish Government believes that UNCRC bill will be a catalyst for change in all aspects of public life, supporting full realisation of children's rights in practice. The Scottish Government remains committed to the incorporation of the bill to the maximum extent of their powers and to commence as soon as possible. So the UNCRC bill will return to the Scottish Parliament so that MSPs can address the concerns. The bill, however, cannot be sent for royal assent until it is amended. However, at the moment, there is work that is continuing. So they have established a strategic implementation board, which will champion the UNCRC programme moving forward. They are also looking to develop a children's rights, skills and knowledge framework with accompanying training strategy. So this will build capacity across all sectors of the workforce of Scotland. They have also a national improvement programme which will provide support for implementing the children's rights, skills and knowledge framework and improving projects in local communities. So there is ongoing work already started and moving forward. Next slide, please. So they've also developed a 3-year implementation programme. So this commenced April this year and will run till March 24. And there is 4 key strands to this. And the 4 key strands are around empowering children and young people, embedding children's rights in public service, children's rights resolution, and the Scottish Government's leadership for children's rights. They're also looking at guidance, and the guidance is currently being developed with partners, which will be made available in 3 phases. And as I said previously, I'm part of the strategic group in relation to that, so part of the steering group. And when they're talking about partners, that's forming from third sector, local authorities, etc., and government. So phase 1 is a non-statutory guidance on implementing. Phase 2 is the realisation of children's rights. And phase 3 is guidance on fulfilment of reporting duties. So the first phase of guidance is in its final phase and should be completed by the end of the year. There was a amendment sent out just recently to get some views around this, and that's all been returned, and now they're updating with some of the comments that they received back from that. So that guidance hopefully should be out by the end of this year to provide for public authorities. So next slide, please. So the guidance is to assist public authorities to understand the purpose of the bill. So it'll help them consider their status in relation to where they are in the bill, assess their function, and undertake a process to review current compatibility and readiness. So where are we at the moment in relation to this bill? So the guidance should help in preparing you or us for the incorporation of the UNCRC. So that first guidance should help in relation to that. Where are we already, and how will it help us prepare for this incorporation when it comes in? Next slide, please. This then speaks about the reporting duties under the bill. So listed authorities also have a responsibility on reporting. They must prepare and publish reports on a 3-year basis on what they have done to comply with the duty in section 6 of the bill. So in other words, to give better or further effect to the rights of children and the actions it intends to take during the next reporting period. However, we already have responsibility in reporting on children's rights through the Children and Young People Scotland Act. And I'm aware that we are in the process of preparing this report as it is due for the Scottish Government coming up. The next slide, please. Thank you. So as previously mentioned, the Children's Rights Wellbeing Impact Assessment. So it's intended to help us champion the interests of children, as well as challenge us to think about what more we can do to place children and young people at the centre of our policies. So for example, it asks us to think about what impact this policy or decision would have on children enjoying their rights. So an example of that could be if you were going to position a zebra crossing somewhere, for example, what impact would that have on children's rights? If we were going to introduce a new policy in relation to children's services, what impact would that have on children's rights? And it allows us to ask these questions so that children's rights is at the forefront of these decisions when we're making them. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what does that look like in practice? So a children's rights-based approach is a principle and a practical framework for working with children and young people, and it's grounded in the UNCRC and international rights conventions. It's about placing the UNCRC at the heart of planning and service delivery and integrating children and young people's rights into every aspect of decision-making, policy and practice. And this shows that it can be done through the 7 principles. And here it speaks about dignity, participation, life, survival and development, non-discrimination, transparency and accountability, what's in the best interest of the child, basic human right, interdependence and indivisibility. So rights can't be cherry picked depending on circumstances. They are their rights and they're there all the time. They're not just given and taken away when it suits. The next slide, please. Thank you. So I thought it would help to provide you with some of the work that is happening in Falkirk now in relation to children's rights that obviously I'm involved in and that I'm aware of, and just to give you a wee update on where we are on that. So as previously mentioned, I chair the Children's Rights Engagement Group. Work has been taking place to gather the views of young people across Falkirk in relation to the Integrated Children's Service Plan and what matters to them. So there was work carried out pre-lockdown, so before this whole pandemic, where we gathered the views of over 200 young people within Falkirk around what matters to them. And we have recently been working closely with Young Scot and the Scottish Youth Parliament, and we actually had a record engagement from young people in Falkirk on their lockdown lowdown surveys that took place in mid-pandemic and post-pandemic. And again, this was to look at identify what's important for children and young people. And as you can see, mental health and well-being was really high on the agenda for children and young people and their future. We also asked about their rights, and as you can see, the top 5 important to them were in relation to education, being listened to, support to live and grow, proper housing, and the right to play. So looking at those 5 rights, these are the main focus that we're going to move forward in relation to our children's rights planning, in relation to our Integrated Children's Service Plan moving forward. Sorry, excuse me. So next slide, brilliant. So the group will continue to engage with children and young people to ensure that their voices are at the heart of decision making and planning. And as you can see there, we have various different groups that are already taking place at the moment. We've got a rights respected school that's happening. So obviously children around Falkirk are aware of their rights and what's happening. You'll be aware of the promise that's now there. Falkirk are now looking at employing somebody in relation to that, and we would hope to work closely with the new person within that role and how we can support that. Again, if it wasn't for the UNCRC, we would not be talking about GIFEC. The children's rights is embedded all the way through GIFEC. It's embedded all the way through the promise. And again, as I'd said before, we're currently supporting the Scottish Youth Parliament in relation to having 4 members of the Scottish Youth Parliament within Falkirk, and we would hope that those 4 elect members would be the voices to represent Falkirk at a local level, but also at a national level. And our next slide, please. And I think it's essential that we remember and that we focus on this, that the UNCRC Incorporation Bill goes much further than just children's services. This covers every element of public service, and I think it's important that we remember that and we keep note of that. It's not just a children's service responsibility moving forward. Thank you very much. That's my presentation. Hopefully my voice didn't crack and you managed to get the gist of that. And it provided you with some information on the incorporation and again what our service does here in Falkirk. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Julie. That was really helpful, taking us through that. There's obviously a lot of implications. And as you said, not just for children's services, but right across the council area. And we will probably look to see more of you as things go forward and as we look to develop services and across the council, not just within education and children social work services. So I've got about 10 minutes that we can have for any questions or comments that anybody would want to make. But if we can ask people to be fairly sort of concise. I'll go to Councillor Colley first.
Thanks very much, Julie. That was really helpful, and I think as lay people, you know, you're in and about it all the time, but I think it's really helpful to understand the implications of the bill across the whole council, but also across partners in healthcare, for example, and other public bodies. So I think it'll be I really like the idea of having a children's rights wellbeing impact assessment and really being able to test what we're doing and really understand what impact that might have on children's rights. And I think, you know, obviously there's a lot of articles within it, but, you know, breaking it down to those principles, but to ensure that young people, children and young people have their rights respected and also enforced. I think it was a bit disappointing that it was challenged at the Supreme Court, you know, but ultimately I think it's important to say that there was unanimous support across the Scottish Parliament for it. So I think all of us see children's rights as being absolutely fundamental, and ensuring that across everything that we do, that we think about it and try to make those real. And I think last week was quite a really good example of children and young people expressing their views around COP26 and really saying, you know, this is our future, and you're making decisions that affect us, and you need to take us. We need to be part of those decisions. Our voices need to be heard. So thanks very much, and I look forward to hearing more as this work progresses.
Thank you, Fiona. I've got Councillor Black.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Councillor Colley said. It was a really interesting report. I mean, the work that you're doing is invaluable. You can see that through everything that you're saying. But just to say about the Scottish Youth Parliament, I would love to attend that event at the end of November, and I did try to attend the hustings later on last night, but didn't quite manage to do it. So was there any way that we can actually see the hustings now, like, you know, on YouTube or something? But I mean, the work that the Scottish Youth Parliament is doing and the support that you give is amazing, because you can see those young people, how much they blossom and grow, and the policies that they actually bring forward are really, you know, they're really important. And obviously at the heart of it is what children are saying and what children value, and that's really important. But no, thank you. I really enjoyed that update.
Thanks, Alison. Julie?
Yeah, thank you very much. Our hustings is a live streaming, and we have it recorded. I've just not found it yet, so I will definitely work on that. But we actually initially had 45 young people sign up, which was incredible, and we've now got that down to 14 young people. So yeah, they're so passionate, and the things they're talking about, you know, they are talking about children's rights, they're talking about COP26, the environment, climate change, education is a huge issue as well for them, and mental health. So their manifestos are really good, and I've never worked with so many passionate young people. So to really have them be able to kind of have some seats at the table and to be able to influence some change would be absolutely amazing. And I know they would be really happy to see a lot of you at their election nights. Would be great. The elections are taking place, they started yesterday, and the election finishes on the 21st. So it's a 2-week election process. So we've got, I think at the moment, we have the highest record of people elected at the moment. So we've got so many young people that are voting, which is great, and seemingly it's the highest in the country at the moment. So we're doing really well here in Falkirk. We have a lot of young people that want their voices to be heard here.
And I hope that is reflected and coming through the democratic process into other spheres of government too, because we could really do with some young people becoming more involved in particular local politics. I've got Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. I'd just like to congratulate Julie and saying there are only the 2 E's in the group. a lot of work there for 2 years. And when I go to some of my schools, they're very proud of being part of the Right Respecting School and being part of that organisation. And it's come along a long way, but there's a long way still to go. And anything that can help is really appreciated. So just like to thank Julie and the rest of the people for the report. And like Alison, if there's an opportunity to come to the elections, I would like to be able to do that as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, James. John?
I'd just like to say thanks, obviously, for the presentation. It was really good, and I know that a lot of schools around about the local authority obviously are doing a lot of hard work from a very young age, and I know in the school, obviously, primary school that I work in, our children are very much aware of it. Every assembly, we bring it to attention of their rights and making sure that they're aware of it, and sometimes they even come up to us and say, it's my right to do this, and things like that. So they're very much aware of, you know, and here, and it's teaching them that's your right, but remember your responsibilities alongside it. So they're very good in knowing the rights and where things stand. So I think from a young age it's very good, and obviously, you know, it's taking it forward and making their voice heard is really important, and we take that from a very young age at the primary school all the way up. So it's really good to see.
Thanks, John. Julie?
I'm sorry, just thank you so much. And I just would just like to mention, so yeah, children do know about their rights, and one of the things that we're really trying to get away from is the whole responsibility word. So we're changing that to expectations, because their rights are their rights. They don't lose them, so it doesn't matter about the responsibility, it's about expectations and how we expect. And everybody has those rights, so we all should be treated the same. So sorry about that, but thank you.
That's okay. Okay, I've got a number of speakers. So I've got Councillor Murtagh, Councillor McHugh and Can Project. So I'll take them in that order. Laura?
Very briefly, I just want to add to that it's very welcome, and as a parent, you know, with children going through primary and secondary last few years, I think it's important to know it's not just the children that have an awareness of rights respecting schools and that language and understanding, but also that's transferred on to the parents and to the wider group, and the importance of discussion of that, and the implication for you know, society and how that really does change things and how it enables children to express their rights with others. So I'd absolutely commend the work that you do, and I think that almost the fact that rights respecting schools is just something that we're all familiar with from a parental, from a child point of view. I think that's what's coming through in your cohort with the Scottish Youth Parliament, and I wish the young people all the success, because I've met some of them and they're absolutely fantastic, some of the candidates. So I'm sure we'll all be delighted to come along. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McHugh?
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Julie. I really just wanted to highlight the voting system. One of my constituents has already posted up on social media because her daughter is standing, and I believe it's 12-year-old to 24-year-olds. Yep, just giving you the chance to give a wee punt out there while we're live streaming this morning, and encourage as many young people as possible to vote, because obviously going forward we want our young people to become young adults and be passionate about voting and making the decisions for our country going forward, and it's absolutely paramount. I'm shocked when I'm hitting doors and campaigning to the amount of young people and adults that don't actually vote for our future. So just giving you the opportunity to encourage all young people to vote for this Parliament. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Adana. Karen?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Julie. I know we're short of time, so my question was around, I'm really interested to hear what work you do specifically with children and young people with additional support needs, who do tend to be some of our most marginalised and excluded young people from having their basic human rights met. But I don't know if you can give us a wee summary, or I'm happy to chat to you afterwards about that.
Yeah, just briefly. Our main focus when the service was still there was around care experienced young people, but there is obviously a position out there for young people, additional supports to have individual and supported advocacy. The main issues that we have around our additional support needs is education. Education is a huge issue, and I would say 99% of the young people that we work with additional support needs is around education.
Okay, thank you. I see no more hands up. Oh, sorry, Reverend Rollo.
Yeah, just call me Michael. It's fine. I'm happy for that. Thank you, convener, and thank you very much for your presentation, Julie. It was very good. Just a couple of questions. When you began your presentation, you spoke about the mentioned children that were in residential care and stuff like that. I presume this means all children everywhere. It doesn't just mean the children in residential care. But just for clarification purposes, I thought I heard you say that, and maybe you just confirm that. The second thing is, obviously, it's great to hear the children's voice and young people's voice. Fantastic. Firm believer in that. What happens if the children's voice is different from the parents' voice? Where does the land lie there? Who decides what voice is the most important voice or the right voice, or how is that sort of outworked if there's a conflict between what a parent thinks is the right thing for their child at a particular age or what the child themselves thinks?
Yeah, I'll quickly answer that. So to your first question, in relation to our looked after young people, our care experienced young people, we support all of Falkirk's care experienced young people. So if a young person is placed within a foster placement in Aberdeen, then we will go to Aberdeen and see that young person. So we have visited wherever they are, we will go. In relation to your second question, that's the importance of independent advocacy, is that actually you have an independent person there to support that young person to express their views. And the benefit around having, if it's a care experienced young person, having children's hearing or looked after reviews, then you have a group, a team of people around there to support that child, and a team of people that make the decisions, not just parents, in relation to the work that I do. And that's what's quite unique about our service, is that many local authorities have independent advocacy services or services out there from other parties, but we are funded through the council. You fund our service, and we are obviously for couriers, but we're independent, so we're still in a position and able to challenge some of those decisions, which is quite unique. The majority of the children's rights officers I work with around Scotland are employed by the local authority, so they have obviously some bias and some restriction there. So we don't have that, which is pretty good in that sense. And we work really closely with the local authority to ensure that children's views are centred to decisions. And in relation to our care experienced young people, the team around that child all work together to ensure that the child is at the best interest. So the decisions that are made are in the best interest of that child. It's not just because that's what the child wants, is it in that child's best interest? And that again is the UNCRC.
And it's across the board, it's for all children everywhere, not just for looked after children.
So obviously our remit is around care experienced young people and additional support. There's only two of us, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of really raise awareness of children's rights, get the Rights Respecting School Award into schools so children all over. We do have some children that will contact us looking for a wee bit of advice, and we'll signpost and we'll offer advice. We won't turn any children away, and we'll do as much as we can. But again, there is only two of us, so we are limited in relation to what we can do.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no more hands up. I've got just a sort of more broader question, and it maybe relates a wee bit to what Michael was starting to develop there. As while there is not a royal assent for the bill going forward and it's going to be amended, we are not going to sit back and not look at starting to embed some of this within our practice locally. And it's a wee bit about how that is then going to be taken forward, because it's one of the key strands of policy work that shouldn't be an added extra, it should be embedded. And it's just a wee bit, I don't know whether that's maybe for Sarah to answer to how we're going to take this forward and make sure that across the council, not just within our children and young people's and education services, but across the council, that children's rights are becoming embedded and taken into account and the decisions that we make.
Thank you, convener. I'll respond, and Julie may want to come in behind me. I mean, fundamentally, Michael, the question that you're posing really, I think, is about this UNCRC incorporation is for every child. It is universal. So it's not just the small numbers of children who are looked after by local authorities. It's every child. Julie's service specifically is targeted towards the smaller cohorts, but we absolutely appreciate how to implement this really important bill. Then we're taking a universal approach, and the work that Julie has only had time to very briefly summarise, convener, relates to the Children's Commission, which reports to the Community Planning Partnership, and ultimately it is that particular group, not in isolation, not alone, and Julia is supported by key partners within the working group, but there is a full commission that sits around all of our working groups to support them, to push through any barriers and obstacles that might be getting in their way. And Julie also is our representative in terms of national activity, so that we are maximising all of the resources that we can from, examples of good practice in other areas, sharing our own good examples, and also, pursuing where we need additional national support. So Julie's work and that first piece of guidance that we're expecting will be about assessing where we are, preparing where we are based on what we know about our current position, and establishing our readiness, and a plan will be produced. But I'll bring Julie in, who may correct anything that I've said, but hopefully not, and perhaps just add to what I've said if there's anything more to say there, Julie.
No, I would just echo exactly what Sarah said there. There is work taking place, and we are at the start of that. But what's really exciting is that the conversations that we're having and the work that's processing is really exciting, that children's rights is at the forefront, and actually to have children and young people heavily involved in that. As I said at the start of my presentation, we had over 300 young people involved in a Teams call, looking at how do they get their voices heard, how can they be central, how can they influence decision making, which is great. So yeah, we have started that journey. Again, it's small steps, but we definitely are there.
So I'm assuming that we are at the beginning of a journey, and we're going to hear an awful lot more about this and the promise as we go forward, and as we see our services transformed. So I think members can be assured that we will be kept up to date, particularly on our obligations as decision makers as well, as we go forward to the future. But I'll just thank Julie again very much for her time this morning and the excellent presentation. And you're very welcome to stay if you wish, but you're also very welcome if you've got other things that you want to get on and do today. But thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your time. And what I'll do is I'll pass the invitations to Sarah, and she can pass them out. You're more than welcome to join us for our election night. And I know the young people would love to see you there. So that would be great. And I'm just going to go because I do have quite a bit of work to do. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Julie.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, thank you, colleagues. I gave a little bit longer to that because there were some really good questions, and I think it was worth just having that little bit extra time to spend on something quite as important. But we move on to something that is also very important, and it's item 7. It's unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and the National Transfer Scheme. And Sarah is going to take us through this report.
Thank you, convener. This report outlines the current circumstances in relation to changes and arrangements for support to unaccompanied asylum-seeking children across the United Kingdom. This report outlines recent changes to the National Transfer Scheme, which I'll refer to as the NTS, announced by the UK Government on the 10th of June 2021 and its possible implications for Scottish local authorities. The NTS voluntary rota scheme was agreed by COSLA leaders in September, and the scheme started in October 2021. Recommendations for committee are laid out in Section 2 of this report. Section 3 provides background information about how unaccompanied children and young people have arrived in the UK and in Falkirk over the last few years. Many youngsters have fled conflict zones and travelled across Europe before making it to the UK, and the majority of new arrivals become known to immigration services and local authorities in the southeast of England, and this has placed considerable demand on services there for looked after children. Currently, although I think this number will now be increasing, there are circa 5,000 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children across the United Kingdom, with 200 in Scotland. The majority of the young people arriving in the UK as asylum seekers are male, aged 16 to 17, but there are much younger children too. These young people have experienced really difficult and traumatic living circumstances, including time spent in camps, separation from family, being victims of human trafficking, victims of abuse, and their basic needs generally not being met. So the young people need support for learning and education, their general health, their mental health, their well-being. All of this require immediate and ongoing response. Interventions for young people need to be trauma-informed. So, to address the significant pressures faced by a small number of local authorities in England who had very high numbers of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, the UK Government introduced the ability for local authorities to transfer young people to care of other authorities. The Immigration Act 2016 gave the UK Government powers to introduce a mandatory transfer scheme, and paragraph 3.4 provides an overview of the scheme and its purpose, which is primarily to alleviate pressures in particular areas and to equalise responsibility. Whilst initially the NTS achieved reasonable success in facilitating transfers to local authorities that agreed to participate in the scheme, there have been issues with the design of the scheme, and that's resulted in transfers slowing or ceasing to occur. It's been widely accepted that the NTS could operate better and would benefit from a more definitive commitment to participation from local authorities across the whole of the United Kingdom. To address the challenges, the Home Office consulted on changes to the NTS in September 2020. The need for change had become more acute due to the pressures faced by those South of England authorities and a dramatic rise in the number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children arriving by small boat. And this pattern has been replicated also this year. The updated National Transfer Scheme is outlined at 3.7 of the report. The significant difference to the updated NTS is the introduction of a voluntary rota scheme. We didn't have the rota previously. The rota outlines the number of young people that will be transferred to all nations and all local authority areas. Joining the scheme is currently voluntary, and it allows Scottish local authorities to transfer unaccompanied asylum-seeking children not only to and from England, but also between ourselves, so between Scottish local authority areas. Those participating in the scheme may transfer children out as well as in, and that is dependent on demand and it's dependent on capacity. The Home Office provide funding to local authorities to provide care and support from unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. And the new rota comes with a newly developed formula, and that determines the numbers of young people to be supported by each local authority area. And there's a bit more detail of that and what that means across the whole of Scotland, contained in Appendix 1. It's important to know that should this scheme be considered to not succeed, to fail in what it's set out to achieve, then it could become mandatory. A benefit of the new scheme is that it allows for planning. It allows us to plan to accept young people into our care, which at present we don't have an opportunity to do. We have to respond to ad hoc requests to provide accommodation and to seek social work support and support from partners. We have on occasion supported young people who have arrived in our area spontaneously. It's important to note, as stated at 3.12, that young people who are given the right to remain as unaccompanied asylum-seeking children become looked after by the local authority in which they present. So with their status as adults determined by the Home Office when they reach 18, that's where funding ceases or certainly reduces. There are a number of other active schemes in addition to the National Transfer Scheme, and these are outlined under 3.13. Considerations are presented at section 4 of this report. Partnership response is required to respond to the implications from the NTS, and a working group involving key partners from the Council and other partners has been established to plan and coordinate a local approach. The Forth Valley group has been developed with chief social work officers and housing partners to look at new approaches and how we share learning and resources to meet the challenges of the new scheme across the whole of Forth Valley. Accommodation is a critical and immediate area of focus. The working group is therefore seeking to identify best practice from across the UK, from other local authorities that are more experienced in supporting larger numbers of young people. We need to identify what the best accommodation options are, what they would look like, and how we would go about establishing them. And in some areas, they have developed separate schemes by recruiting dedicated carers with a particular interest in supporting asylum seekers, and we're very, very keen to develop that for Falkirk. In terms of closer to home, there is impact there. The aim and the ambition, as you know, of our closer to home strategy is to reduce the numbers of children in care settings and to improve outcomes, and the young people being supported by Falkirk under the National Transfer Scheme must be considered looked after. So whilst the strategy intentions are being achieved, we are reducing the number of children and young people who are coming into our care as a new care episode. The small influx of new care episodes that are required in relation to the ROTA scheme will impact on our overall position. Placement availability is limited, and young people will require to be provided with suitable support for a looked after child. We will develop with our carer recruitment campaigns, local supported carer placement options for unaccompanied asylum seeking children. In terms of financial implications, as I've stated, there is an increase in funding for local authorities under the new scheme, and that is welcomed, but it doesn't cover the full cost of supporting unaccompanied asylum seeking children, particularly after they turn 18. The current financial remuneration to local authorities covers the cost of care only, and it doesn't take into account the cost of other services and the support requirements. For example, support within an education setting, therapeutic services in relation to mental health, and each young person requires the support of an allocated social worker, and that is creating further stretch to what is a challenged workforce. We will continue to raise these issues nationally, and we are looking at them within the working group. No funding is currently available to any other public body which might provide a service to young people. At 6.4, the report states that there is an exceptional costs fund being introduced, but we've still to get full clarity in terms of how we can make applications to that. Resource implications are summarised at paragraph 6.5. Risks are summarised at 6.7, and they flow from the implications that are outlined in section 4 of the report. To conclude, convener, the young people who come to live in Falkirk under this scheme and any other relevant and related schemes will be valuable contributors to our communities, and they will bring with them unique attributes that will benefit our economy. The youngsters have had to cope with so much trauma and upheaval, and with our partners, we will do all that we can to provide the essential components which allow them to feel safe and to settle and to thrive. There are significant challenges for us to work on locally and nationally, and the demand on resource is going to be considerable. The challenges that NTS poses in relation to Falkirk Council and partners across Forth Valley has been scoped out, and plans are being made to harness our resources and creates additional capacity to manage growing numbers of young people coming to live in our area. I'd like to refer committee back to recommendations set out in section 2 of this report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and I'm really pleased that we have been able to offer in the past humanitarian aid, particularly to these unaccompanied children, and being able to offer them a safe place. And despite the challenges going forward, I hope that committee will agree that it is the right thing for us to continue to do. But I'll go to Councillor Colley.
Thank you. I'd just like to, I'm fully supportive of this report. You know, we've just had a previous presentation on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and it's clear that this council should want to do all it can to help children achieve those rights, including young people seeking refuge. I had a wee bit of a look at the numbers, and in 2019, Unicef estimated that there were 33 million displaced children around the world, and an additional 2.4 million people, children displaced within their own countries. I can't even get my head around that. That's like half of the population of the UK is displaced. Around 10% of those children are refugees in Europe. And between 2005 and 2020, global numbers of child refugees have doubled. They're dramatically overrepresented around amongst refugees. They're a third of the world's population, but almost half of the refugee population. It's worth noting that the majority of people seeking refuge are displaced within their own regions, and countries like Lebanon and Turkey host the largest numbers of refugees relative to their population. And these figures are only likely to increase as people flee Afghanistan to seek safety from the Taliban. In 2019, Unicef reported that some 33,000 children were unaccompanied or separated in Europe alone. And this really worryingly, the group Lost in Europe, published in The Guardian in April this year, found that at least 18,000 unaccompanied children have simply disappeared on arriving in Europe between 2018 and 2020. That's equivalent to 17 children and young people a day. I can't imagine being caught adrift from my family as a young person, never mind the challenges they have escaped for, including war, conflict, famine and natural disasters. I don't want to repeat what Sarah said about the impact on young people and what they've experienced in terms of trafficking, abuse and their basic needs not being met. These are the ones that all children should be able to expect, not least a warm home, education, healthcare, care and support. So it's the right thing to do. It is voluntary. And it represents 0.07% of the national picture, initially only 2 young people. I hate the idea of words like rota and a transfer scheme. These are vulnerable young people who we can help and we should help. This is about us meeting our obligations as discussed in the presentation, particularly rights to protection for children who are refugees, protection from abduction, trafficking and exploitation, and making their rights to safety, education and an adequate standard of living, healthcare and more real living rights in action. Yes, there are challenges around some of the shortfalls of funding, as we don't know what our share will be of the exceptional cause funds. And yes, we do, as is absolutely the right thing to do, provide the same rights to these young people as all care experienced young people, that we will help and support them beyond their age of 18. I will be very proud to say that we at Falkirk Council took the right steps to support some of the most vulnerable young people and look forward to welcoming them to Falkirk District, helping them to rebuild their lives and achieve their potential. I hope we will all support those rights.
Thank you, Fiona. Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's really brought home in what Councillor Colley was saying there in terms of the numbers in the picture that's being painted overall between what Sarah and Fiona have said, that I noted throughout the report, Sarah was not abbreviating, you know, as is obviously naturally needed in the report, with unaccompanied asylum-seeking children being a mouthful, but the idea of abbreviating that and speaking as a UASC seems utterly wrong, almost in a dehumanising way that we really cannot imagine the trauma that these children have gone through. And I think that it's right, you know, and we've heard that there are challenges, some of them have been well highlighted in terms of this scheme, but it's very clear to me that the one group of people who should not take the burden and responsibility of those difficulties and problems are those who have already suffered the most horrific amount of trauma to even get here. The children that are coming shouldn't be the ones who have to pay the price for an imperfect scheme, and I think it's absolutely right that we join the National Transfer Scheme and that we acknowledge that, like all asylum seekers and others who join our communities, they become our community members, they become part of our society and will be valued equally like all other members of our society. So I don't want to repeat the things which Councillor Colley has said or what Sarah's put in the report, but absolutely give my 100% very passionate backing that we should endorse the recommendations and play our part in this really vital scheme to help unaccompanied asylum-seeking children.
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, convener. Like everyone else, I understand that this scheme is a necessity in the current circumstances, and challenges will only get worse. And as Fiona said in the paper last week, it was in the Times, I believe, they were talking about the number of immigrants who had been housed in parts of the south that had actually just disappeared from care, which is a very frightening prospect. So I think we all, and as a country, we're very good at actually helping people who are in need, and we've had migration for many centuries. But I should like to understand one or two basic things in this report, because in 3.9 it says for Falkirk Council that quota would currently be 22 based on a 0 to 18 population of 31, and it gives 291 according to the latest NRS population. But in the appendix it says it would be 2 immigrants. So could somebody qualify this statement for me so I can understand whether it's 22 or 2?
Sarah, would you want to explain
Yes.
just that?
Yes, happy to do so, Councillor Munro. So the National Transfer Scheme in its current and new form is operating on a basis of turnover. So each quota, each time Scotland takes a turn on the rota, there are 45 young people who will need to be accommodated by Scotland on each of these turns. And there are 2 young people within each of these turns that are attributed to Falkirk. So it's our responsibility each time there's a request of Scotland on the rota that we accommodate 2 young people. Now, the speed of these turns on rota is dependent on the pressures that are felt in England or other parts of the country. So it's not as though we will only have 1 turn on the rota over the course of a year. The turns will be dependent on the demand. The maximum young people that currently could be accommodated by Falkirk, to the point where we would say that we cannot accommodate any other young people, is 22. So our maximum overall number is 22, and any turn we take on the rota is 2. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, yes, yes, it does. I also noticed that if the child is under 18, you get a rate of £143 a night, which is £1,001 a week. But if the child is over 18, this drops to £270 a week, which is obviously a concern. And as you state, there's only local authorities receive any funding at all other than this notional 3 million that's mentioned in 6.4. So what kind of shortfall are we expecting, given that if these children are over 18, we're not going to actually be able be funded in the same way?
Are you happy for me to respond, Kavina?
Yes.
Scotland has agreed to be part of this national transfer scheme on the basis that the young people who come to Scotland are aged between 16 and 18. There are opportunities available to Falkirk and to any other local authority in Scotland to be able to offer placements out with that age bracket. But the agreement to accommodate young people between 16 and 18 certainly allows us as a country to do our level best to prepare as much as we can for an increasing number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people to come to our area within that age bracket. We can either develop specific, particular resources to assist us with the additional capacity that we require, to be able to build skills and experience in our workforce by targeting that particular group. The circumstances around the reduction in funding post-18 does impact significantly, particularly on Scotland, and that is because of our legislative change around our responsibilities towards young people with continuing care and aftercare. So what we have to do, given every set of circumstances will be different, Councillor Munro, some young people will choose, I'm sure, to remain in Falkirk. Some may find family to settle with in other parts of the UK and may well leave and be accommodated elsewhere in the UK. But primarily, we would be receiving young people who require to have somewhere safe and to be settled, to be educated, and to have their health requirements met, certainly until they reach the age of 18. Within the time that we will be working with these young people and they are considered to be looked after, they will have access to the same supports and the same planning that any looked after young person will have. So there will be arrangements being made with their dedicated team around them to determine whether they are a young person who have family in Glasgow, Inverness, London, Manchester, and they will be supported to be moved, or whether they will be remaining in our care, whether that be in continuing care or aftercare. So there is no specific definitive answer I can give you about what those costs could look like post-18 for children and young people. It is a particular area of attention for Scotland, more nationally with the Home Office, because of the particular issues that relate to continuing care and aftercare. And it certainly is something locally that we will be monitoring as we have more young people and we build more experience with what this will mean for us going forward.
Can I ask one final question? Given that you have accommodated children in the past and these young people are coming from different countries, I would imagine that there are particular challenges around language and differences in culture, and I don't think any of us should underestimate the challenges of dealing with the difficulties that these young people face. So maybe my question is, do most of these children we're accepting have English, or have you that additional challenge as well?
We have had only small numbers of unaccompanied young people at any one time, so it's very difficult for me to talk about specifics because that would be too identifying. We have certainly looked after young people who have come to us with no English at all, and we have had young people who have arrived with a very good command of the English language, but universally we've had young people who've been really committed to learn the language, really committed to education, who're really committed to making friends and finding out about the country and the place that they're living in. So very kind of actively engaged with supports and resources that we can give them, and obviously schools have been really key to that too. And the carers been willing to support young people in all sorts of different and creative ways.
I don't think we can underestimate the challenges you face, but thank you.
Thank you. And the challenges are great, and they're obviously personal challenges for us. I think we need to be very careful about the types of languages that we use going forward as well, when we are speaking about our young people. Irrespective of the challenges before us, they should have no detriment to the types of services that we would expect, and they should have the same access as any other young people within our local authority area. But I've got Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of questions. And like everybody else, I'm 100% behind the scheme. These young children, adults have went through and suffered more than we can ever manage, ever think of going through. Just something that Sarah that mentioned regarding the education. How do we, as an authority, how do we determine at what stage they are regarding education? Sorry, if you've got if we've got a 4.5-year-old, a 5-year-old child, we put them into primary one. If these are older children and they're at the same stage as that, I just want to know how we manage the age groups for education.
Sarah?
So what we always find, Councillor Kerr, is that young people, regardless of age, are really eager to take up education. So one of the benefits that I have pointed out in the report is that there are some opportunities with this new rota for us to have a little more knowledge about young people who are going to be coming to Falkirk. So we have some more opportunity than we have had previously to plan for a young person's arrival, to match them well should they be in foster care placement or elsewhere. So we have some opportunities to consider what the young person's educational needs might be, but typically what we do is our ultimate initial goal is to receive the young person into our local care and to settle them into their placement. So the most important thing is to bring them to us, take them to the place where they are to settle, help them to feel safe, and to begin that important job of getting to know them. So we, perhaps beyond their age, we need to understand what stage they're at, and what walking into school may feel like for that young person, and what transition arrangements might need to be planned for. So we do that as a children's service. We have the information that we have, what we know about the young person, and we make suitable plans as a service. And we determine, which is the local school, prepare the local school with the information that we've got, and we just wrap around the child or the young person. If they are too old for school, and there would be college placement that we would be looking at or considering for the young person, but opportunities for them to be learning as part of a social set certainly is considered to be incredibly important for the young people, to have activities out with the place that they are staying in, to meet and to connect. And also these young people do have to travel in and out of Glasgow. They will be in and out attending appointments. They'll have appointments around immigration status and perhaps with lawyers, and we'll be doing everything that we can to link them in with family, immediate or extended family that they might have too. So education planning is certainly key.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I was going to ask about the older children, but you've kind of answered that for me. As many other people have said, that there will be challenges. Social work, getting social workers, funding, housing, because we didn't expect them to be in an unacceptable housing, like hotels and different things. We want them to be a normal life, same as everybody else. So the housing is going to be an issue going forward, not just in Falkirk, for everywhere. But I'd just like to thank you for the report, Sarah. And as everybody else says, it's important that we as a local authority support as many of these young people as possible. Thank you very much. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. So can I ask committee, are we happy to agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. And we look forward to welcoming the young people into our communities in the future. Okay, colleagues, I'm going to take a 5-minute break right now. However, I am going to make a plea for brevity and ask officers to assume that when we come back to the education section that reports have been read, and to keep to the highlights in the reports in order that we can get through the business for the second half. But if we can come back at 11:30, folks, that'd be appreciated. Thank you. We'll reconvene. We're moving now into our educational functions section. Just before we go to those reports, I'm just going to ask everybody with us in the meeting today to reflect as we go through this section, the journey that our education services have been on in the last couple of years in dealing with the pandemic. We quite rightly hear a lot around our NHS and our health and social care service and the work and the pressures that they've been under, but our education services have been under as significant pressures and continue to be so with the various restrictions that are still in place. However, they have continued to work and have almost got into a business as usual position, which is quite an achievement. But when you see the work that they've done around ensuring our young people are safe, but also around the attainment and the delivery of education and the welfare aspects post-pandemic, is quite significant. So I just want to take the opportunity to make that comment that our teachers and all the support staff around education have done a huge amount of work, which we're indebted to in caring for our young people over the pandemic, and continue to be so. Yet we still have the suite of reports that are coming in front of members for decision and for updating as we go forward. And I'm sure folks will be able to make comments within the individual items and reflecting on that. I'm sorry, I'm not taking any further comments. We really need to move into the agenda. If I could ask you to make your comments within the agenda items as we go forward. So item 8 is the early learning childcare 1140 expansion update. And Gary.
Thank you very much, convener. The recommendations are outlined in section 2. There's 7 recommendations today, and 3 of those are for agreement by the executive. There's no real change to the background. The position remains as it is in terms of as outlined in the report from the previous reports. Just to draw to members' attention, in section 4, the key areas in section 4, there are 6 projects that remain outstanding at this particular moment in time. I'm pleased to say that one of them, Woodlands ELCC in Callender Park, is due to be handed over relatively soon, and that would mean that subject to telephony being installed, it will be able to open for business at that site fairly soon. Another 3 of the sites we're expecting handover at some point in December, things being well. The key points in section 4.2, I'm really pleased in terms of some of the early intervention approaches here. There's two key areas here. The Scottish Government have increased the eligibility criteria for to include parents who are care experienced, and also there's been an increase in demand for our eligible twos, mainly through families who are qualifying for benefits. So there's a double effect in the system just now that we're trying to deal with in terms of increased statutory numbers coming through the earlier sector for 2-year-olds. So what we've tried to do within the system just now to try to alleviate that and mitigate against it is we've provided 10 extra places at Nethermains ELCC to allow us some time and some scope to consider the demand and how we would deal with it going forward. The proposal therefore in terms of this section is that we are proposing to ring fence some capacity from our under 2 non-statutory provision areas within one ELCC within each of the 3 localities that would allow us some time to meet the additional demand, and the second part would be to allow us a chance to look at what the additional demand would be. We think that's pragmatic and it reflects certainly the need to make sure that these 2-year-olds that fall into the eligibility criteria are supported within early years. Section 4.3, key here is that over the last year, members have brought to your attention, and thank you for doing it, a number of challenges in terms of parental angst and other issues around some of the challenges we've had over admissions and some of the reflections we've had on our policies so far. I'm very pleased to say and we're trying within the admissions policy. The positive steps we're taking forward is that there's going to be increased priorities for children that have got siblings within the setting itself. There's an increase in the priority that's going to be given not just with children with ASN, but we're looking at the consequential effect of children that have families that have ASN relevance to the particular family. Those will get an increased priority on the new proposed admissions policy. In addition, those ELCCs, all the ELCCs have now been aligned to local primary schools. Previously, some of the ELCCs were actually nursery classes within the school, and it's only right that we align and give priority for those ELCs to the primary schools, many of which they sit in the same grounds as the primary schools. Listen to some of the comments back from parents. A clear timeline has been put in place within the admissions policy to make sure parents are aware of when the key deadlines are, and that's very important that parents get their applications in place, and there's also a bit more clarity around how we deal with the split placements. If approved, the admissions policy would be used immediately, because we're starting the admissions at the end of this month and they would come into place for session starting in August 22. Section 4.4, again, officers have been looking really carefully at the parental demand, what parents want, how we're delivering 1140, and what we're trying to do here is we're trying to maximise the capacity that we've got, optimise the take up from parents, and probably to try to minimise the parents that are maybe don't get their first choice, or they've got to take split placements because at certain points in the ELCC settings the demand is full. So maximise occupancy levels, make efficient use of staff, and try to get more families into the system where they want the local demand. There's transitional arrangements in place if the proposals are agreed. What we would do is any child that's got a placement just now, they'll not be asked to change any placement. We will maintain that placement until they leave the early year setting. So I'm very pleased to say that any transitional arrangements will be honoured, and there should be no child that's in the system just now affected by any of the proposals that we've put forward today. If agreed, the proposals would be implemented now for August of 22 in line with the admissions policy I mentioned earlier on. Just a note to the members to say that as we've successfully opened Boriston ELCC and Bo'ness, Kinneil ELC that's been used as a support for that through decant arrangements until we got it open, will revert back to a nursery class Model 1A provision as was already intended from August of 22. So there's still extra scope in the system within that area just now to deal with various things. 4.7, I've highlighted a number of probably statistical information looking at the cohort that we use to submit a regular progress report to the improvement service. The positive news is that the workforce from April 22 we're projecting just around 675 FTE, a huge and significant increase in the ELC sector, which can only be welcomed for the economy of the Falkirk area overall. Listening to the comments at the last meeting, tried to show a bit more of the financial information that members had asked for and alluded to at the last meeting. Again, in the revenue position, we are projecting an underspend just now. We expect that underspend to rise fairly significantly because there's a number of COVID costs that are currently shown there that would have to be negated in the current financial year. The capital position, which members commented on at the last meeting, we've tried to show the spend that's still due against certain of the outstanding projects. It does show that there's a provision for additional costs of £325,000. It's difficult just now to quantify what the additional costs are because until we get to the end of these projects, the final bills, etc., don't come in. So development services facilitate the internal accounting arrangements, and I'll provide an update on that at the next meeting. That being said, overall, convener, that there is some challenges in the system, particularly around the utility companies coming on site to do their connectivity. There's been quite a lot of delays in arranging that with the service providers. However, nonetheless, the train slowly churns along. We're nearly there, and throughout the next this month and next month, we're hopeful that the majority of the infrastructure projects will come to fruition. And at the next report in early 22, we'll be able to confirm that to members in, as usual, a positive manner. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, and I'll go directly to Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Gary. Here we are again, and we're almost there, as Gary says, and what a journey we've been on, what a journey our staff have been on, and I tell you, we cannot fault the dedication that all our staff have shown in these projects to get them across the line and to get them open for our children and our families. So thank you, heartfelt thank you to everyone, you know, that's been involved and continue to be involved. And not only are we working on getting these projects open as quickly as possible, given the mitigating circumstances, we have reshaped our whole early learning experience for our children and our families, thinking of absolutely everything. I totally welcome the new, the updated additions to our admissions policy, listening to families and elected members. So appreciate that and thank you so much for that. And I did get a wee bit excited the other day when I was out walking my dog and I saw steam coming from the Woodland Nursery, and I'm thinking, oh, you beauty, that must be it. Just about ready to open. So that is very exciting that we'll have our Woodland Nursery open, which will be a brilliant asset to Falkirk Children's Services and to our families. Our children will be able to spend as much time in the woods as they wish. And I do regularly bump into staff and the likes of Aldi's and Lidl's hunting for waterproof trousers and welly boots, because that's their kind of uniform these days. So thanks for that. And going back to recommendations, I'm happy to accept and move the recommendations, both to agree and to note. Thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh, and I'll just formally second and open up for any questions or comments. Michael. Michael, you're on mute.
Sorry. Just to echo your words of commendation right at the very beginning, well done to everyone. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. And briefly, just to say, it's really good to see under the amendments at 4.3, these to read about children with additional special needs and with the children with a sibling already attending there that are going to be put in the same establishment. So I think that's real good wisdom, and thank you for implementing these things. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Michael. Councillor Nimmo.
Yep, thanks, convener. Can I just start off by echoing your comments that you kicked things off with, convener? And on behalf of the Labour group, can I just congratulate all the education staff for their hard work and dedication throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown. Perhaps it might be worthwhile actually coming forward with a paper with proposals as to how we could actually give our staff in general some sort of financial benefit as a way of thanking them. Doesn't have to be money, of course. We could just organise another couple of days annual leave for them to try and pay back their hard work and dedication. And also, of course, their students for adapting very quickly to the online learning situation. A big congratulations to them as well. It's a fantastic job that they did as well. Just going back to the report in hand, convener, the early learning and childcare, I'm just wondering, obviously, that the money that we have for this project, it's a national project and the money's all ring-fenced, but just in my own particular ward in the Lower Braes, I'm just wondering, with all the house building that's been going on over the last few years, I'm just wondering if there's any planning gain lying in our bank account waiting to be spent that could be used to maybe try and supplement some projects. Thanks, convener.
Okay, Gary, have you shaken Development Services purse?
It's probably pertinent that Councillor Nimmo raised such an important question, convener, and we're doing a bit of work just now on that, just to assess where the planning gain is that we've currently got in the bank just now, how it's been aligned to certain of the projects that we've got, and where the planning gain will help inform, as Councillor Nimmo quite rightly and wisely says, any future projects to help support the expansion programme. So if Councillor Nimmo bears with us for a week, I'll certainly get back to him with some information on the question that he raised, which is relevant. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I'll be quick, convener. Just thank Gary for the report, and it's and also I'm listening for when we went at the financials. It's getting it's really good when we see that the financials is there, and as everybody else says, these new accommodations for our ELCCs are absolutely outstanding, and everybody's to be congratulated, convener. And just thank you very much. And can I just mention this? Just know that the teaching staff that everybody's been mentioning, it's janitorial staff, the cleaners, the dinner ladies, everybody's gave everything during this pandemic, so not to forget them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. As there's no other hands, Councillor McKee, I'll come back to you to sum up.
Oh, thanks, convener. I know I didn't always sum up, but it's just really to highlight Michael's point that not only are we looking at additional support needs for our children, we're looking beyond that. We're looking at additional needs of the families of those children and help accommodate their child into nursery to support the family. So the admissions policy has gone that wee bit further, which is excellent. And also just to highlight Councillor Nimmo's comments about Ward 8. Obviously in the report there is work ongoing in West Quarter where there's going to be an extension onto the school due to the house building in our area, and also at that point we're going to be looking at extending the early learning centre as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Are we happy to agree the report? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 9, which is CLD Community Halls update and transfers and disposals. Gary, that back with you. Yep.
As convener, and I think brevity is the order of the day. This is a relatively quick paper, and I'll do my best to summarise it. The proposal, the recommendations are that the proposal is to amend the current lease, which is effectively a 15-year full repairing and insurance lease, to a 15-year lease that covers two things. It provides a schedule of condition and it also provides a schedule of works. The main reason changes
Gary, you appear to be breaking up a little bit. Gary. We're not hearing you, Gary.
Might be better without the video, Gary.
We're only getting maybe every second word, Gary.
Okay, I've stopped the video. Hopefully that's better, convener. Okay.
That's better.
Okay, I'll be very quick. The proposal here is to change the initial lease that we had previously got agreement from a 15-year full repairing insurance lease to a 15-year-old lease that covers two things. It provides a schedule of condition and also provides a schedule of work. The reason for that change is we've received some comments back, very helpful comments back from Community Ownership Scotland, Falkirk CVS and some of the management committees themselves. We've listened to them, and along with our colleagues in the asset team and the legal team, we've devised the new lease. The proposal therefore is that we adopt this new lease. There is no other change to the lease other than it provides those two things for the reasons that we've given in section 4.3. The report also covers an updated position of where we are, as we call it, with phase 1 of our halls that are currently in the process of being the final process before hopefully we sign up a lease agreement. They're outlined in section 4.5. The report also gives the chance to update members on where there's already a bit of work being done in a number of other halls, and it's been progressed so that at least we're going to try to bring these into consideration as phase 2 of the project. And the 7 halls there are identified in 4.9. I would stress that this list is not exhaustive at the time. It doesn't reflect there's a number of engagements and liaison with other hall groups and committees, but it does give us a chance to at least bring forward a note to show that there is some progress being made behind the scenes, not just for the phase 1 project. Thank you very much, convener.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener. Really just to say that I welcome the move forward, and I think the decision that's been made here will definitely give some of our whole committees a bit more confidence in taking on the responsibility of the halls, knowing that the council will be supporting them from the back. So that's good. Being the need to remind ourselves that our halls have been closed for the best part of the last year and a half, and as things open up again and people move on, committees change, this will give a bit of stability moving forward, and hopefully we'll get these halls into our community's hands sooner rather than later. So thanks for the report. I agree.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Russell.
Thank you. All I'd like to really add is thank you for the report. I think it's really heartening. I second the recommendations. I think it's inspiring to see the communities, the magic committees are coming together, and they're seeing the ambition that the transfers allows them to have and the regeneration opportunities that are there throughout the communities of Falkirk, and hopefully that will be reflected in our own practices going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I'll open it up for any other questions that anyone may have. I don't see any hands up. Are we therefore happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Item 10 is an update on Connected Falkirk, and there's Robert Naylor.
Thank you, Convener. Members will be aware of Connected Falkirk. We previously had a report on progress with this at the other side of the summer. Connected Falkirk is a component part of one of our Council of the Future change programme projects. It sits within the overarching Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow. The various component parts are detailed within the report. An update is provided on the rollout of audio-visual equipment and the device deployment, which is giving all primary 6 to S6 pupils a one-to-one iPad, and thereafter it will be on a ratio of 1:5 for primary 1 to 5. So the report notes that we've now got Wi-Fi updates in all of our schools. We're at 95% device deployment, and that will be complete by the end of November, as will the rollout of the audio visual equipment and Apple TV. So I don't think there's a huge amount that I want to dwell on in this report. It's very similar to a previous report, but it's to reassure committee that despite the difficulties that we reported last time about the international unavailability of computer chips, we now have our supplies. They're being rolled out. The training is ongoing with schools, and we're very pleased with the progress that we've made, and everybody should have what they need to have by the end of the calendar year. And then the next part of next year is going to be about upskilling the staff and the pupils and the parents in the use of this new innovative digital technology. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Naylor. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Robert. This again is a remarkable achievement under the pressures that we've had, you know, over this last year and a half, and we're the envy of a lot of councils throughout Scotland due to the initiatives that have been taken by our staff and our officers to get this moving. And it's actually incredible that we've now got Wi-Fi updates in all our schools, that our young people have got their appliances, and our staff have got theirs, and that we're almost offering a bespoke support to our staff and our children and our schools in the way that we're you know, supporting individuals as they get their appliance, and that's just fantastic given what we're all the other pressures that we're under. I really wanted to just highlight that going forward, this has been really quite incredible and absolutely necessary, given the online learning that our young people and our teachers and support staff have had to get involved in. So I appreciate the work that's been done, and I think it's fantastic that we've moved so quickly given the restraints that have been upon us. So I move this report and accept the recommendations within it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Colley.
Yeah, just really briefly, I think I'm really pleased to see this report coming forward. It's a huge amount of planning activity. I can't believe the amount of work involved, and I'd just like to echo Adana's word in recognising the work of everyone involved and supporting the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McHugh. I'll open it up for any further questions. Michael.
Yes, just to echo what's been said, fantastic, very well done, very exciting, really, really good. Just a couple of questions. Obviously, software and hardware is going out of date very, very quickly at this moment in time. Looking future-wise, will there be resources available for the upgrading, and is there a plan for the upgrading of the equipment? I know we've just got it, but is there a plan and is a provision made for that going forward? And also under 6.4, I noticed that that there are expected to be savings, although I suppose these things are difficult to quantify themselves. So there will obviously be savings and probably some money available, but I just wondered what the long-term plan is for upgrading these devices, etc., going forward.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Mr. Naylor?
So the council have entered into a contract with various different providers, both for the initial supply of the devices and for their refresh. Similarly, provision has been made for the ongoing costs of the upgraded Wi-Fi. So at the very commencement of this project, when we went to council to seek the necessary funding, that was part of the overall funding agreement over, from memory, I think it was for the first 5 years, within a further look at the next 5 years. So that is in hand in terms of your point about changing software and so on. So it's part of the contracts that we've entered into. On the savings point, I think I could report that already we have some efficiencies in the system. So this year, for the first time, we've got a couple of hires and an advanced hire being delivered entirely digitally across the whole council area. So there's a saving there in terms of not having multiple teachers involved in the delivery of these courses. It's one teacher that delivers it to an entire cohort, and also the children no longer need to be spending time travelling from one school to another school as part of the original consortium arrangements. So there's a saving on transport, there's a saving on time, and there's a saving of the input required from our teaching staff. So these are effectively pilot deliveries of a couple of higher courses, but moving forward, that model will be further developed, which should give rise to additional efficiencies in the system.
Excellent. Thank you for your kind comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I've got John, then I've got Meryl. John?
Hi, just to say that obviously we had a rollout a couple of weeks ago. The primary 6s and 7s were very, very excited to obviously get the devices in their hands eventually. And already we've noticed a big, huge difference in obviously the Wi-Fi and being able to connect up everybody's iPad all at the same time without having to hang out of windows or hang out of doors or anything like that, and just be able to sit at a seat and be able to participate in lessons. So it's going to be interesting how we take forward some of the learning in classes, and also teachers are getting training to help them deliver more interesting and more technology savvy lessons. So looking forward to using it, and it's been positive so far. And as I say, primary 6s and 7s were over the moon when they got theirs here. So just to say thanks very much.
Thanks, John. Meryl?
Hi there. So I'm a parent of 2 secondary school children, and I'd like to reiterate what John said, that they're so excited to be using the devices. They've had iPads for years and years, probably since they came out, but now they've got their school iPads, and forgetting all the theory and all the reports which have come by talking about the benefits, I can just say they are so excited to have these devices. They are really engaged in their school learning, and I've got friends who've got children at various high schools. So mine go to St Mungo's, so they've just got there recently. I think they were the last high school, but I've got friends with children at lots of different high schools, and they're all saying exactly the same thing. Absolutely delighted.
Thank you. It's great to get that feedback. Is there any other questions or comments? Councillor McHugh, do you want to any further comment?
I think 7.2, the report says it all, convener. Thank you.
Okay, happy to agree the report. Thank you. Okay, item 11 is a summary of scrutiny activity, early learning and childcare. And is it with yourself again, Robert? Yeah.
Thanks, convener. So committee will be aware that at the November cycle of our meeting schedule, we always bring a summary report of both the Education Scotland inspection visits to schools, but also the Care Inspectorate visits to ELC centres over the course of the preceding year. Education Scotland inspection activity ceased at the start of the pandemic at the end of March in 2020, and it's only just resuming now. So there were no school inspections by Education Scotland through the course of the last year, which is why there isn't a report on school inspections before the committee today. Education Scotland have resumed what they're calling thematic inspections, so they are, as we speak, engaging with some of our schools, but they will not be reporting on individual schools. They will be reporting on various themes across the country, and that report, I believe, will be finalised in December. Individual school inspections will resume at the end of January 2022. However, the Care Inspectorate did continue to inspect early learning and childcare centres, and if you go to paragraph 3.6, it notes that we had unannounced and sometimes virtual inspections that took place over the course of the last year. So 3.6 notes that we had a visit to Sacred Heart, to Glenburn and to Larbert, and the overall evaluations, despite the COVID circumstances and the pressures that staff were working under, nevertheless still achieved evaluations of very good and good and good. The one exception to that was an unannounced visit to Rana Nursery, which took place in August 2021, just after the return. And you can see there that one of the evaluations was of adequate. Our process is that whenever we get an inspection evaluation that is less than good, that report is referred to the scrutiny committee for more detailed look by members. So a report on the Rana inspection will be going to the next meeting of the scrutiny committee. The background to that evaluation of adequate is, as I said, it was unannounced, and on the day there were some staffing shortages, and they reached that evaluation of adequate in part because of the arrangements that were in place over the course of lunchtime. So there were some minor recommendations made to the layout and the management of the playroom, but steps were taken immediately to remedy that situation. But the detail of that, as I say, will be discussed at the scrutiny committee, which I think is either next week or the week after. So that's the summary. Not a huge amount of inspection activity, but such that there was. Our centres continued to provide good evaluations in terms of the work and practice on the ground, even though we were from time to time really struggling for staff self-isolating, children being sent home, staff being sent home, and so on and so forth. So I think it's worth noting that we continue to be able to deliver a high quality service across the piece. Thank you, Convener. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Robert. I'd like to highlight to everyone today the pressure that our education services have been under, in particular our early years centres. These early years centres and the staff within them have stayed open right the way through this pandemic. They have offered support to families and to children that were struggling, families that obviously were essential workers who needed childcare. They have done doorstep drops of activities and offered support and a listening ear to many of our families throughout this this whole year and a half, and continue to do so in amongst a service that has been recreated, and there's been building works going on and various other things. So bringing all that mixed together, it's just, you know, it shows the resilience that we have within Falkirk and the belief that we can support our families and we can move forward. And as Robert says, we have got a good standard and very good standard right across the board. I have spoken to the manager of Rana Nursery, who her and her staff have taken this quite hard. You know, it was unfortunate at the time that there was a staff member down during lunchtime. But overall, I want to really impress upon folk the hard work that's been going on within. And, you know, when you get spot inspections, an inspector, yep, they're in there to pick up on anything. And I've never shied away from any inspection in the future, because if you're doing something that they don't think's hitting the target, they tell you, and there is a plan put in place to improve that. And that's what's happened immediately. Education officers have been in Rana, they've discussed with the manager, and they've put a plan in place, and the improvement has been made. So I welcome that, and I thank the staff for their resilience. There has been massive changes within that particular nursery as far as staff goes. As you will be aware, we've increased a huge amount of staff within our early years, and so has every other council. So there's been a bit of to and fro as far as staff moving to different councils and us getting our new staff embedded. And in all our nurseries, we have a lot of new staff that are getting embedded right in amongst a COVID pandemic. Fantastic, they have did so well. So I appreciate, and I just want to reiterate, the support has been put in to bring our standards up to good and very good. So thank you. I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, convener, and I would echo those words from Councillor McHugh. I think I don't have much to add other than to emphasise that although we have a very highly professional service and well-trained service that is valued greatly as a workforce, I know as the daughter of a long time early years worker that there's also a bond of love and care that is particularly prevalent in the early years because of the nature of the job. And I knew that when my mother referred to her children at home, she wasn't speaking about me and my brother. And I think that bond has been particularly, and that the strain of those additional emotional aspects really deserves mention for the hard work that our ELC staff have put in through the pandemic in various stages that we are not yet through. And to just pick up briefly on Mr. Naylor's point, that you know that we are still going through many periods of self-isolation and staff absence and disruption with children, and that's likely to continue for some time, and that's continuing to have an impact. So the staff need our continued support, and I certainly would echo the words of Councillor McHugh in saying how much they're valued. And as she was saying, plans are now in place. We learn from all inspections, and it's a positive direction going forward. But again, our thanks to the staff going forward and throughout.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Black.
Thanks. Yeah, I think on this occasion I agree with Councillor McHugh and Councillor Murtagh. I think that the staff have been under intense pressure. They've done amazingly well under the circumstances. I think that unannounced inspections are very important. On this occasion, it's been well said that the reasons for what happened and that was addressed quickly. What I would like to ask is, every organisation has to have internal scrutiny and processes where you can get assurance. So during the pandemic, obviously it's an extreme emergency situation, but how have we managed to make sure that we have assurance that the services are good on a day-to-day basis?
Mr. Naylor.
We're in daily contact with our centres. In the initial stages of COVID, that was primarily about making sure that everything kept running and we had the requisite members of staff. But as we bedded down, and this is reflected in some of the reports that are about to be presented, David Mackay's education team was in contact with schools in terms of their improvement activity, making sure that they were concentrating on the right things. Once we got past all the sort of health and safety measures and the management of the safe operation of the schools, there was a very quick return to as much business as usual as we could possibly have. Developed plans very quickly for the requirement for remote and blended learning, and we're able to return really remarkably quickly to being able to be monitoring what was happening in terms of learning and teaching, and attainment and achievement.
Okay, thank you. I hope that gives you the assurance that you were looking for, Councillor Black. Okay, as there are no other indications of anybody wanting to speak, are we happy to agree the report?
Agree.
Agreed.
Thank you. We move into a final suite of reports that are all related in some form or another. So I hope that folks will be able to see that as we go through them. We start off with item 12, which is the National Improvement Framework Standards and Quality Report 2020 to 2021. And Robert, go to you.
Okay, Convener, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to take items 12 and 13 broadly together.
Yep.
The National Improvement Framework is a Scottish Government document which is updated on an annual basis. Its focus is around the ambition to achieve excellence and equity for all children across the system, and it sets out on an annual basis priorities for improvement determined at a national level. What then happens is that Falkirk takes that national document and it creates the Falkirk NIF. The Falkirk NIF in old language was probably what we used to refer to as a service plan. And within that service plan, we would set out our various actions and priorities and initiatives for improvement across different component parts of the educational landscape. So we work on that plan over the course of a year, and then at the end of the year, we report on the progress that we have made with that plan and then develop the next plan. So agenda item 12 is the Standards and Quality Report. That is the, if you like, the outcome of all of the improvement activity that took place during the course of the last year. And then agenda item 13 is the new plan for the current year, which is based not just on the latest national NIF, but is also based on the improvement and ongoing work that is reported within the Standards and Quality Report. So appended to item 12 is a very significant lengthy document that details all of the improvement activity that we concentrated on through the course of the pandemic. Given the time that we have available to us, I'm not going to dig into that document in any way deeply, but should members have any questions on any bit that's within that lengthy appendix, my colleague Rona J is on the call and she can provide detail of any specific questions that members would have. So then just moving on to agenda item 13, that sets out, as I've already mentioned, our plan for the current year, the activities that we are asking our schools to engage in. Our schools in turn will take the Falkirk NIF and they will develop that into their own school improvement plans. And as we have, each individual school produces a standards and quality report on the progress that they have made through the course of the last year. I'd just like to reassure members that despite the fact that we've been dealing with the pandemic, the document that I'm referring to gives you a sense of the collaborative work that's been done by head teachers, by other staff groups, focusing on literacy, numeracy, obviously connected Falkirk. So there's been massive amount of work that have continued beyond just making sure that we kept the schools open. And I think importantly, we're able to assure ourselves that children continued to learn and recover quickly. I'll pause there because I'm conscious of time. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Naylor, and I think it's right to take, in order to take them in context, to look at them both together, because one complements the other. But I'll go initially to Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Robert. Really, if everybody's had the opportunity to read even just a little bit of these two reports, then they'll recognise the massive amount of work that's going on in our schools. These are just some of the examples within these reports, are just snippets of what's going on throughout our schools, and it gives you I suppose a bit of insight into the volume of work that's going on, and the amount of work that our individual staff are doing to support our children and young people is really phenomenal. And because I've had a chance to read Robert's comments at the beginning of the report and David's comments at the beginning of Agenda Item 13's report, then I would like to echo these comments, and the resilience of our staff and the dedication our staff right across the board to keep things going. And if you look at the attainment levels, we are keeping our attainment levels and improving as we go forward, and that's fantastic. Yes, we've set our goals, and we're meeting goals, and we're going beyond those goals in some respects. Others, we have more work to do. It's a moving feast. Obviously, we're constantly trying to improve, and really the bottom line is to give every single one of our young people within Falkirk the best opportunities possible for them to reach their goals going forward in the future. So thanks, and thanks to the staff yet again, Robert, and please take our thanks back. I see Rona online as well, and I know the incredible amount of work Rona and her colleagues are doing as well, and I totally appreciate, I can't say enough actually how heartfelt the appreciation goes, because there is incredible work going on. It really galls me sometimes when I hear people criticising our education service, when when you've got a bit of insight and you have young people yourself and you see the amount of incredible work that's going on. And I would just like to, I would love to have a newspaper saying how fantastic and how brilliant our staff is, rather than criticising something that's possibly fell by the wayside or went wrong. So thank you once again, and I move both these reports and the recommendations within them. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh, and I'm happy to second the reports and echo everything you've said. And I know that our staff aren't sitting back on their laurels, and that as they see the attainment improving, they see that attainment gap starting to close, it is spurring them on even more, and willing our young people to be the best that they can be, and that will continue. Therefore, our aspirations are always going to be continue to be high, and rightly so. Reports contain a huge amount of information, very detailed information, and I appreciate that it may not have had people have had time to look into every area, but it just shows you the depth of the work and the outcomes that we're achieving from that, and more power to your arm and across the service and beyond, because as Councillor Nimmo highlighted, or sorry, it was Councillor Kerr, Councillor Nimmo, I can't remember now, that there is a school family. It's not just the teaching staff that are delivering this education, it's the school family and the wider family, including the children's families that are actually helping all our young people to achieve. And that close contact with the school is something that is had to be developed over time, and that's the efforts our staff have put in. So I'm more than happy to second and open up for any other questions or comments. No, be happy to agree the reports. Yep.
Agreed.
Thank you. Comes to our final item, which is item 14, and it's Forth Valley and West Lothian Improvement Collaborative Progress Report. And Robert.
Thank you, Convener. And just to remind committee that some years ago we agreed that we would have a report twice per year on the progress that the RIC was making, and the RIC report that is before you today very much complements the two previous reports. It's about service improvement, it's about collaborating with our other local authority partners in areas of school improvement. As previously rehearsed, strong focus on literacy, numeracy, digital learning. So what is appended to this report today are essentially three key documents. One is a recovery plan that was put together through the course of 2021. There's then a report on the progress made with that recovery plan through the course of the last year. And then finally, there's a further plan in the same way that I described for the previous two items. There's a further plan of what the RIC intends to do over the course of the coming session. As you know, we work collaboratively with Stirling, Clickmanager and West Lothian. And within the report, you'll see at section 6.2, I think it is, that we've continued to get funding from the Scottish Government to support the secondment of various different officers from the 4 councils to take the lead on certain key components of development, activity, staff training, and provision of additional resources and learning materials for our children and young people across the 4 different councils. I think, again, given the tightness of time, the key point that I would want committee to be aware of is that the contribution that was made by the Forth Valley and West Lothian RIC to the national e-learning offer called eSchool. So we have done particularly well in 2 key areas of our RIC work. One of them is career-long professional learning, where we've got, I think, the most significant uptake across the 4 councils in the country, but also our contribution to the national e-learning offer at the time of the various lockdowns and at the time of the last Easter holidays, when we were supporting children to prepare for the alternative certification model, was significant and noted at a national level. Again, fairly lengthy documents with fairly lengthy appendices with a lot of detail in them, but again, happy to answer any questions assisted by my colleague Rona J. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Madana.
Thanks again, Robert and the convener. Folks will see if you've had the opportunity to read the RIC report, that collaboration is definitely invaluable. And I think the collaboration that we've had through this last year and help in supporting each other really within education has been very welcoming. I think the report shows that our staff are engaged and they want to learn. They're showing a huge interest at a time when we could easily just say this is overwhelming. It's too much, but they've persevered and they've pushed forward, and all of that will only enhance the provision that we're providing here within Falkirk. I know there was a lot of scepticism at the beginning of the RIC and different comments made, but showing how the professionals within the RIC have been able to pull on each other's experiences and support is obviously just been totally invaluable, as I've already said. I'll move this report and the recommendations in it. Thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I think the Regional Improvement Collaborative has been welcomed, particularly by staff. It's enabled them to open their horizons and to be able to collaborate on a much broader platform, and as a result there's been a lot of learning that's been brought, and that's been a significant benefit to us. I think over the last couple of years, while we've been in the pandemic, having the ability to do that learning with our colleagues has really helped, particularly some of our newer and younger staff coming in to be able to build up those relationships, and we're starting to see the benefits of that coming through now. So I really appreciate the work that's been done in bringing the Forth Valley and West Lothian collaboratives together, and I think it has been a significant benefit to us, certainly in Falkirk, and I'm sure the other authorities feel likewise. I'll go to Councillor Black.
Thanks. It was just to ask if when there'll be a a fuller evaluation of its actual success, because it's been on the go for a wee while now. And for me, my concern is that there's duplication that's taking up officers' time because they're having to do things twice. So that's just, I'd like to know when there's going to be a full evaluation of it to see actually how successful it has been.
Okay, thank you. Robert, do you want to?
Yep, Councillor Black, thanks for that. There's an education reform ongoing at the moment, where they're looking at the separation of Education Scotland into two different bodies, one which will be an arm focusing on inspection, similar to the previous HMIE. So there's going to be a separation into, we understand, two different organisations. There's also a review ongoing in terms of a replacement body for the Scottish Qualifications Authority, and ministers and civil servants are also going to be undertaking an evaluation of your question, the success evaluation and future of RICS is part of that whole national discussion at the moment. Understand that Education Scotland are conducting engagement with various different RICS as we move forward to reach some level of evaluation. In terms of your point about duplication, the way that we've organised ourselves within our RIC is that, yes, there are some activities that are Falkirk-led, Falkirk engagement with schools. There are others that we've done on a collaborative basis, but what we're trying to do is ensure that there isn't duplication. So if we've got emerging practice from the RIC, and I mentioned career-long professional learning, rather than Falkirk having its own programme and the others having their own programmes, and there's a RIC programme, we've tried to organise this all within the one framework so that the offer is made across the 4 councils, and actually that way you avoid duplication, but you also get a richness in the quality and the experience that our practitioners have as they look at various different areas for improvement.
Okay, Councillor Black, you content with that?
Yeah, I think just, is there any idea of a timescale for the actual when an evaluation would be complete? Just it'd be interesting to obviously see what the evaluation said.
Well, the consultation on the education reform ends in early December. My understanding is that the Scottish Government will then bring forward recommendations in the early part of 2022. So I would think probably by the time we get to the summertime, there'll be a bit more clarity on what the system is going to look like moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Robert. And that brings us to the end of today's meeting. Can I just thank everybody for their attendance, and hope that you can now grab a bit of lunch before the next round of various meetings and things that folks have got for this afternoon. But thank you very much for your attendance today.